There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Shaw talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
Our sponsor is Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-American, and here only by the grace of God. In 1 hour, everything is going to change. The prophet Isaiah warns us that in the last days, God is going to turn the world upside down. The prophet Isaiah warns us that in the last days, God is going to turn the world upside down. He declares, "Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down." Isaiah 24:1. According to this prophecy, sudden judgment is coming upon the earth, and it will change everything in a single hour. Within that short span, the whole world will witness fast-falling destruction upon a city and a nation, and the world will never be the same. If you're attached to material things, if you love this world and the things of it, you won't want to hear what Isaiah has prophesied. In fact, even the most righteous of God's people, what Isaiah says might seem unthinkable. Many people will surely ask, how can an entire world be stricken in an hour? If we didn't believe the Bible, and if we didn't believe it was God's pure word, few of us would take Isaiah's prophecy seriously. But Scripture makes it clear. In a single hour, the world is going to change. The church is going to change. And every individual on earth is going to change. Good listeners, I've changed my program 3 times the day that I'm doing this broadcast. Led of the Spirit, led of information coming in, hitting me, led of feeling of need. It's all gone together. We are in critical times. The largest rocket barrage from Gaza ever to be launched has hit central Israel, this amid fears of an imminent war. The Palestinian militant rocket attacks and Israeli retaliatory strikes have already created a worrying cycle of escalation in recent days. So many things have come across my desk just today on this one subject. But a few days ago, I noted where the United States has now restored assistance for the Palestinians. We're going to provide them $235 million in aid. The Biden administration announced on Wednesday, May 12th, it would provide this $235 million in U.S. aid to the Palestinians, restarting funding for the United Nations agency supporting refugees and restoring other assistance that had been cut off by then-President Donald Trump. The package, including humanitarian, economic, and development assistance, was detailed by U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken as part of an effort to repair American ties with the Palestinians that had all but collapsed during Trump's tenure. It marked Democrat President Joe Biden's most significant move since taking office on January 20th to make good on his promise to roll back some parts of his Republican predecessor's approach that Palestinians denounced as heavily biased in favor of Israel. Biden's aides have also signaled they want to reestablish the goal of a negotiated 2-state solution as a priority in U.S. policy on Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So much information has come across into my attention today. Turkey is now talking about getting involved, leading a group of nations. That's right, for the establishment of a multinational, multi-faith Jerusalem. Just today I saw that. Russia is threatening Netanyahu with getting involved in the war in behalf of the Palestinians. Folks, we're in a critical state. History may be made. I had to bring this to your attention today. That was the second point. That was the second batch of information that I've received. Now, to my previous point. The crisis has arrived when we must assert our rights or submit to every imposition that can be heaped upon us, till custom and use shall make us as tame and abject slaves. Who said that? George Washington, back in 1774. Let me read it to you again. The crisis is arrived when we must assert our rights or submit to every imposition that can be heaped upon us, till custom and use shall make us as tame and abject slaves. Where are we today? In spite of all that's going on internationally, the Middle East, and we know what the Middle East is in history and in prophecy. But now note this, confusion at home like we haven't seen in my lifetime. Joe Biden has had his 100-day honeymoon. People were bound to start complaining eventually. And I'm going to refer from a letter I got from John Green titled, "The Biden Honeymoon is Definitely Over." Now something at the gas station has caught many people's attention. I was filling my car and noticed that someone had put a sticky note on the pump. It read, quote, "Prices, compliments of Joe Biden," end quote. When I told a friend about it, he commented that those notes had been appearing in other areas. I got a good laugh out of it, but in the back of my head I was wondering if this was something more than normal grumbling about the government. Was something different this time? Well, on a 15-minute drive after that, I saw 2 pickup trucks proudly flying F. Biden flags. Yep, there's something different this time. Granted, I live in a free Idaho, but I've never seen a flag like that about a sitting president in the past. This isn't the normal grumbling of citizens embarrassed by a president's Texas accent or his mean tweets. This is a seething anger that one gets when cheated by a con artist. We were promised a return to normalcy. What we got was a doddering old fool with the most radical agenda in history. During the height of the ISIS occupation of Mosul, the resistance took to scrawling the letter M on buildings and walls. It stood for Makwanwana. That was a resistance group. Granted, our situation is not quite as dire as that in occupied Mosul, but not yet anyway. But those sticky notes and flags may be the new American call for resistance. I saw an article a couple of months ago in which it was predicted that the embarrassment of buyer's remorse would gestate into anger over the next couple of years. Well, that was wrong. It seems the gestation period was much shorter than predicted. It's time to understand what the Harris-Biden administration has done to earn such animosity. When Joe declared war on the fossil fuel industry, it was apparent that his policies would eventually drive up prices at the pump, and the electric meter too, of course. But gasoline has gone up each week for 17 consecutive weeks. This hasn't happened since 1994. This represents a 50% increase in some places. How many Americans do you suppose live on 50% below their means? Because if they don't, every time they fill up the tank, they're going to have to think what they're going to pay for. What are they going to give up? To drive the point home, some prankster with the sticky notes is making sure that they're reminded that they voted for these policies. Every time, think about it, because every time they have to choose between new shoes for the kids or a tank of gas. Aside from the rising costs of gasoline, look at what happened when the Colonial Pipeline was shut down a couple of weeks ago. The United States has achieved energy independence, but just barely. Our energy infrastructure operates near the limit of its capacity. Under such circumstances, even small disruptions can be catastrophic. A mere 3 days of disruption to the pipeline caused shortages and long gas lines throughout most of the eastern United States. Showing true sensitivity to these suffering, Energy Secretary Granholm helpfully commented, and I quote, If you drive an electric car, this would not be affecting you, end quote. Okay, fine. So tell me, genius, how do electric cars run when California turns off the electricity? Because the wind's blowing? Here's an even better question for Secretary Granholm. If one pipeline disruption can put 17 states in a state of emergency, what are the long-term risks from canceling the Keystone XL pipeline? But we shouldn't worry. Good old Joe's on it. He announced that he's forming an exploratory committee whose job is going to be to select a blue ribbon panel to study the fuel shortage issue. It's going to be meeting after Labor Day. That's right, he's naming a committee to select a committee to study that which we already know. We know that we depend on fossil fuels, and there's nothing that greenies can do to change that. We need to be expanding our fossil fuel industry, not choking it to death. And unemployment is rising again. Well, it was about 6.1 in April. Lunch Bucket Joe predicted that April would see the record increase in jobs. Instead, the increase was only 1/4 of what he predicted, and unemployment actually rose. In a true testament to the wisdom of the federal government, nobody anticipated that if you pay people to not work, that you'll not work. It's just as well because nobody can afford gas to commute anyway. What a state to be in. Well, Joso also got another record in April. 173 illegal aliens crossed the border, the highest single month number in history. Remember when we had 13,000 children kenneled at the border? Well, those were the good old days. The numbers now exceeded 17,000. Their living conditions are deplorable, with overcrowded facilities, COVID infections, and outbreaks of lice. But the administration can't seem to decide if this is a crisis or not. Perhaps Joe could appoint a committee to study the issue. Or maybe Kamala could go to the border and look for herself. I'm sure they can determine it, if it's a crisis or not. They ought to be able to get something done before the next election, don't you think? And finally, what may prove to be the biggest crisis of all? Inflation. The Harris-Biden administration is tossing around trillion-dollar spending bills like their party favors. This is all spending above and beyond the normal federal budget. It's money the government doesn't have. When the government spends more money than it has to make more by printing or by borrowing it. When the government puts more money into the economy, the money that's already there becomes worth less. And just like that, we've got inflation. It was 4.2% in April. That was the sharpest spike since 2008. And that number doesn't include the rising price of gasoline or food. It will inevitably go up more. I got that letter from IRS in which Joe bragged about the stimulus check most of us got. The letter made no mention of the inflation that Joe's spending binge is creating. His big accomplishment was to send everyone some money, and then that lowered the value of all of our savings. It's true, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I'm sure nobody mind working a few more years. It won't bother. Before you retire, we do it if it's in the public interest. By the way, how does Joe Biden compare to Jimmy Carter? Gas shortages, check. Unemployment, check. Inflation, check. International threats testing the U.S., check. Rising interest rates, pending. Joe is just one hostage situation in a botched rescue attempt, just one away from reprising the Carter administration. Maybe we should be thankful that he calls a lid at 3:30 every day. Personally, I'd rather be napping, not going through it, and also have him napping than making those decisions. All of this is why Dems are in such a panic to consolidate their power before the midterm elections. They know 2020 was a fluke. Their electoral prospects are dim unless they can pack the court, nationalize elections, and make Washington, D.C. a state. But through the grace of God, they'll not succeed unless we surrender. God doesn't give us what we want. God gives us what we need. We wanted Donald Trump reelected. We got slow Joe Biden. We wanted Kevin McCarthy to be the Speaker. We got San Fran Nan. We wanted Mitch McConnell to be the Majority Leader, and we got Chucky Schumer. Even though these wishes were denied, God blessed us. Why? How? Joe Manchin, for one. Kristen Sinema, another. They are all as stanzas, these two, between us and democratic destruction. If they manage to keep the Dems' power grabs in check until 2022, God will have given us what we need to succeed. Well, that is, as long as we don't blow it, look at the rhinos. We've got a year and a half to get our act together. America knows what they want. No more creeping socialism. No more irresponsible spending. No more apologizing for America to the world. If the Republicans can get behind these objections, they'll garner the support of all the conservatives, and they will retake Congress in 2022. Otherwise, they'll have wasted God's blessing. I suspect that either Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis will be elected in 2024. Whoever is elected as the next Republican president, well, they're going to owe Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema a presidential Medal of Honor for their service, their preservation of our republic. Two things vastly different. Two situations. One right here in the United States, the other one in the Middle East, both happening at the same time. In America, he's being led by Joe Biden. You see why these are tragic, dangerous times? We need a divine intervention. We need a return to Christ as a nation, and our churches need to return to the preaching of the fundamental gospel of Jesus Christ. You and me, we need to crawl in that prayer closet. We need to beg an almighty God to have mercy on us as a nation. Program brought to you by Lincoln Log Homes, Kannapolis, North Carolina. God bless until the next broadcast.